The Force is with you, young Skywalker.
But you're not a Jedi yet.
Alright guys, welcome. Today we're going to make this scene from Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, completely free in Blender and DaVinci Resolve. So if you're ready, let's get started and jump in. I actually tried to make this scene a few months ago, but it turned out worse than Vader's hairline, so this video will be more of an exercise on how to improve an older scene than create a new one from scratch. First, the Vader model I'd originally used was pretty bad, mainly because I made it. So I exported one from Jedi Fallen Order and applied to it its textures. This would prove to be pointless later though, because I just ended up using a black emission shader to texture most of Vader. Once that was done, I rigged him with Mixamo. For young Skywalker, I used the same model as before, just with a black emission shader. I originally tried to animate Vader and Luke with Plask.ai, but I found it wasn't worth the hassle, so I switched to hand animation instead. To make this easier, I created new rigs for Luke and Vader with the Rigify add-on that comes with Blender. It's best to use a Rigify rig rather than the one from Mixamo, because it uses inverse kinematics, which basically means it's much easier to animate the arms and legs, so you don't have to worry about rotating every bone to get it into the right position. I then parented their lightsabers to their hand bones and got to work animating. And animating for this scene was fairly straightforward, as there weren't many keyframes to add. In total, I'd say I'd only spent about 2 hours animating. In the first iteration of this scene I did, I had created a smoke simulation and then put it on a transparent card in my 3D scene, just in front of the camera. But it looked horrendous. So this time, I'd render the smoke completely separately and combine it with the render in compositing. To make the smoke sim, I used a few spheres as inflow objects and joined them together. Then I set the domain resolution of the cube that would cover the smoke sim to 64 and experimented with the settings till I got a decent result. I set the dissolve time to 20 and added in a wind force underneath the inflow objects and set the wind strength to 1. Once I had the correct settings, I then increased the resolution divisions to 128 and enabled noise to add some detail to it. To make Vader's cape flow like, well, a cape, I selected the vertices around his neck and waist and hooked them to a new empty object by pressing Ctrl-H. I then added a cloth modifier after the hook and transferred the weights from Vader's body to his capes. This is so that the areas around the shoulders or on the thighs where I don't really want the cloth to simulate will be controlled by the rig. To control what areas of Vader's cape will be simulated, add a new weight paint group to the cape and set the weight to 1. Then use the weight gradient tool and drag down over the areas you don't want to be simulated. Then in the cloth's physics section, set the group to the weight paint group you just made, and also make sure Vader's body is a collision object, so his cape doesn't pass through. I then created Luke's hair with the empty hair object. However, when I first added hairs to Luke, it didn't add them in some places, so I UV unwrapped his head with Smart UV Project, and then recalculated the normals of his head outside to fix this problem. Once I added the hairs, I just used the comb tool to put it into place. The hair looks great, but we need it to react to Luke's animation, and I don't like using the hair dynamic setting in Particle System as it's way too slow. So instead we'll convert the empty hair to a curve object, then go to the extrude option, increase that slightly and convert that to a mesh. Once that's done, decimate the mesh to about 20 or 30,000 faces, then cloth simulate that. And then gave the environment a metal texture and the orange lights a faint emissive material. To make the environment feel more full, I added a volume scatter node with anisotropy of 0.99 and density of 0.002 set to a blue color. Then added a cube that covered the scene that had an emission shader plugged into a volume node. I then plugged a noise texture into the strength of the emission shader and multiplied it by 0.1. This chicanery basically creates the illusion that we have smoke in our scene. In the compositing tab in Blender, I added a glare node set to fog glow with size 7 and a threshold of 1.7 to make the lightsabers have that glow effect. In DaVinci Resolve, I color corrected the footage by making it more blue and decreasing the exposure. I also added the smoke render pass on top of it. For the lightsaber clash effect, I downloaded a lens flare image and animated its position and scale so it would get bigger when the sabers clashed and then fade away. To make the render seem more realistic, I added some film grain to it. And with that, I gave you guys the final result. Thanks for watching, guys. If you could like and subscribe, that'd be great. And if you have any suggestions for any other cinematic scenes I should make, please leave them down in the comments below. Next week, I won't have another tutorial because I'm working on something bigger. It should be out in the next 2 or 3 weeks, but till it's done, there won't be any more cinematic scenes for a while. As to what it is I'm working on, well, if you like Star Wars, you'll definitely like this. Now, I'll let you get on with the rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.